Welcome to the Global discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. Today, it's a real treat. I'm joined by Sam Hearne. Sam is one of those special individuals who actually helped us launch the Global Interview many, many years ago. We ended up publishing over 400 written interviews with creatives, leaders, and thinkers, and that's was really the where this whole Global Discussion show came from. So, Sam, it's great to have you back here. I'm really interested to talk to you about your career, what's been happening since we last connected. And maybe let's start that conversation by asking you to introduce yourself to our worldwide audience. Tell us a bit about what you do, Sam. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And from all those years ago when we first connected, it's just so nice to keep the conversation going and do it in a different way. So I'm so grateful to be here. My name, if you haven't met me before, my name's Sam. It's so nice to meet you. I am a business coach and mentor by trade. So I support women who want to create more profit in their business, but want to do it in a simpler, more effective way. That's kind of the top line of what I do. But beneath that, what I really focus on is supporting women with creating a life and a lifestyle that works for them. And if that means they need to break down some narratives, they need to go against society's expectations, that's a huge passion of what I do. I want women to be able to be building a life of freedom in what that means for them, joy in what that means for them, and wealth in a way that they can relate to. So yeah, I help women make their businesses more profitable, but beneath that, it's about their lifestyle, it's about their happiness, it's about their fulfillment, and it's about creating choice. I'm also a podcaster, a public speaker. I've just launched a clothing line. So I'm a typical entrepreneur these days. I've got lots of different things going on. But yeah, that's a little snippet, and I'm sure we'll dive deeper.
Well, thanks, Sam. And wow, a clothing line. I had no
I
idea.
know.
We're going to get into all the helping women for business. You do some phenomenal work there, but let's start with the clothing line. That sounds really exciting. How did that come about?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So I actually got this on the day we're recording this. I've just had the samples through, and it launches from the day we're recording in 3 days' time. So I'm really excited. So I just kind of, I came into the online business world and this kind of social media existence, let's say, in 2016. And as you know, when you have been doing something for such a long time and you have such a passion for it, sometimes you almost need to have different creative outlets. And I definitely found that I've got to a place in my business and my brand where it's really stable. I love what I do, but I just had this idea of I want to be able to create this kind of energetic impact that doesn't have to result in being coached or mentored by me. I wanted it to be something bigger than that. So yeah, I've got 3 lines: the destiny line, the success line, and the abundance line. And there's hoodies, t-shirts, caps, and mugs. So I'm really excited. It just gives me another way to bring that energy and intention out there, that's not in coaching or mentoring, like I said, but in something fun, in something different, and in something that also is quite subtle. It's not all about me and there's not my brand everywhere. It's just, I wanted something that people can wear and just feel good in, So yeah, that's that.
And of course, it's called Destiny Success. And what was the third one?
Abundance.
Abundance. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
So there's a different mantra for each of those lines. So the destiny line is I dictate my destiny. The success line is my success is inevitable. And the abundance line is more please. And the brand of the clothing line is called the Bulletproof Woman.
Love it. Loving your
Yeah.
work, Sam. Fantastic.
Thank you.
And wow, that's something new completely. And let's talk a bit more about supporting women in business. Let's talk a bit more about your passion to help women in business make more money, make more profit. I know that's something very close to your heart, but you also try to do that by also keeping it simple, straightforward, practical. So where does this come from, Sam? What set you off on this trajectory in the first place?
So my passion for keeping things simple is I am a qualified teacher with a first class honours degree in education. So I was the head of sixth form. So I taught for 10 years, 11 to 18-year-olds, and they didn't all want to learn the subjects I was teaching. So of course you had to make it simple, actionable, but also engaging. So I have a real passion for learning and keeping things simple, because it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. So that definitely comes from teaching, and the fact that there's, when that light bulb goes off and you've taught something and someone says, oh my gosh, that makes sense to me, whether it's a teenager or an adult, that feeling is what it's all about, you know. And I think some brands and businesses in the online space, I believe, and everything I share is always from my own opinion, so it's not right or wrong, you know, it's just different, but I believe make it more complicated to try and become more desirable to the person, you know. So wow, they know so much more than I do, and I need to work with that person because they've created this big, you know, whether it's the lingo or the ways they share. And I think actually, if we just break this down and keep the learning bit simple, it's the application. People succeed because they implement and they execute and they take action, not because they have all of these complicated methods that they have mastered. And in my belief, that's what I have seen from teaching, but also in coaching and in business. The simpler you can make it, the more you're likely to execute. So that's my passion for simplicity. And my passion for the profit side is, again, it's kind of linked. When I first came into social media, it wasn't what it is now. Far from it. You know, Instagram was just photos. You couldn't even do a live. There was no stories, let alone reels, TikTok, threads. You know, none of that was a thing. And LinkedIn was definitely just for people that had corporate jobs. So it was quite it was very, very segmented when I came into the online world. There wasn't so much blending. And when it did start to blend, what I noticed was there were these kind of smoke and mirrors in marketing, and it was all about trying to impress people and all about trying to show this specific type of life. And what I found was, and I know you will relate, and so many of all of your listeners will relate, is I wanted to be, this is the truth, I wanted to feel like I could be a millionaire, but I still had to do my Tesco shop. I still have to fill my car with petrol. And now I've got a toddler. I've still got to change shitty nappies. You know, like there's no way around avoiding the nuances of ordinary life. And I never wanted to create a business that was built around this kind of lifestyle of only one side, you know, the lifestyle of luxury or the lifestyle of you know, just the holidays. I wanted to create a business that meant that I could be wildly successful, but leave the house in my jogging bottoms, post parcels that I sell on Vinted for £2, wear my flip-flops. You know, I want that. So my passion for profit is really, I want more women to feel like they can create more wealth, but it doesn't have to only be one-dimensional. It doesn't only have to be saved for those that can, you know, leave their house for 6 months at a time. You know, you might have a mortgage, you might have small kids, you might have childcare, you might have nursery, you might be going through a divorce, you know, you might be going through perimenopause. Life happens, and that doesn't mean that you can't be successful. And what I really wanted from those two messages are, we need to keep it simple because it doesn't need to be complicated, and it needs to be realistic. You know, I don't believe that successful people are only a certain type of person with a certain type of lifestyle. I don't believe that. And I think that that's where those two passions kind of merged.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And yes, there's definitely room at the top. Isn't that what they say? And
Sure.
I think, yeah, I think you made a great point about there's different types of success and there's lots of different ways to be successful too.
Hmm.
And you talk about brand, and there's so much spin on influencers and YouTubers, and some do it really well. Some people behind the scenes are just burnt out doing it,
Hmm.
you know, and you often see the very high profile people having to take a break from that type of, I don't want to use the word false, but that putting on a show almost,
Yeah.
instead of that genuine, we use the word authentic a lot these days, don't we? And it brings me on to my next question, which is about brand. Because obviously businesses need a brand. You need to be able to buy into something. And I think you, if you don't mind me saying, have also created your own personal brand as well. You've got your own podcast show. You've been a successful best-selling author. You've got the business. You've now got the clothing range. But you put some building blocks together to help create that brand, didn't you? Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your thoughts around personal brand and business brand and how maybe the two intertwine?
Oh my gosh, I love this topic. Okay, so let me give you a couple of beliefs first. So my first belief is having a personal brand is not the same as having a personal life. So if you feel like you as a personal brand have to share everything about yourself, you don't. So, for example, and I'll give you some really great examples, I've got a really strong personal brand, but I also still have a private life. For example, my daughter, her name and her face are nowhere on the internet. So she's a huge part of my life, but she's part of my private life. Anytime I go out socializing with my friends, they are never on my social media. The only person that is consistently and has always consistently been on my social media is my husband. So if you were to look at it from that perspective, I have a really solid personal brand. But when you hear that, you might think, oh, yeah, that's true. You know, she doesn't share these things that are so important to her. So my first piece of advice when it comes to building a successful personal brand that allows you to not feel exposed, vulnerable, or that you burn out because you're sharing everything all the time is to put some boundaries in place. So a personal brand is personal 100% and it's based on you, but it absolutely does not have to break boundaries that you don't feel comfortable breaking. The second thing is, if you have a service-based business, so you could be a yoga teacher, a therapist, a web developer, a professional photographer, an EFT practitioner, life coach, any service, having a personal brand is only going to amplify your business. Please know that. So if you have a service-based business, injecting an element of you and you as a personal brand into that business is 100% going to help amplify your business. Then now let me talk about some building blocks. Ultimately, the number one reason anyone should have a personal brand is because they want to build and connect with their people. They have a passion for people. A personal brand is about personal connection, personal resonance, people. And if you have a service-based business, your service-based business is not ever going to be successful if you do not have people going into your business. So if you have this amazing website, but you don't have a community, who's going to your website? No one. So the personal brand and the service-based business element, they link really well if you want to focus on also building a community to help bring them your service. So some building blocks that I did, which are still relevant now and are really, really important. The number one thing that you can do as a personal brand is to add value to your audience and to create consistency. Consistent does not mean constant. And to build consistency so your community can trust you. So that might be a podcast episode once a week, a YouTube video once a week, a blog, a LinkedIn article, an email newsletter. It doesn't have to be lip syncing to reels every day on Instagram. But you need to decide what your version of consistent is going to be, because if you are building a personal brand and a service-based business, consistency is paramount in keeping your audience interested, connected, and for you to be front of mind. When you have those things happening, that leads you to the second part, which I said. So you've got consistency, but then you've got adding value. When you can add value, your audience is going to start to come back to find out more from you. Exactly like if you had someone that was doing reviews on holidays. If you then took one of those reviews and you went on that holiday and it was amazing, you're going to go back to them and think, I want to learn more from you. So some things that I put in place was I did regular Facebook lives in a Facebook group, which back then was like all the rage. You've got all sorts of things now, Telegram, Voxer, all of that. So I did 2 weekly lives. I did a weekly podcast. I had a weekly newsletter, and I doubled down on Instagram. You can use any platform, but I would say, to recap, number one, your personal brand is not the same as having a personal life. I can't stress that enough. You have to be able to protect who you are as a person and people that you love in your life and be able to have that. Your service-based business is only going to be amplified when you have a personal brand. Having a personal brand and a service-based business is all about the people. And there are two factors you want to consider when you are growing that community. And I'm still doing this now, 8 years later. So this is not only for a certain level of business owner, is adding value consistently so they want to come back, and creating consistency so they can trust you. And when they trust you, they are interested, they want to consume more, and they want to come back. You become front of mind. Hopefully that's helpful.
That's more than helpful. That's fantastic information, Sam. Thanks for sharing that.
I could
I
talk about
love
this all
what you
day.
said about having a personal brand doesn't mean it has to be your personal life, and
Mm,
having those boundaries and deciding what's in and what's out. Love that. And the other thing that you said that really struck with me earlier on was you have to be consistent but not constant. And I
yeah.
think we all fall into that trap of thinking, I've just got to keep putting things out there. But it's
Mm.
the consistency, isn't it? Rather than being always on all the
100,
time.
oh, 100%. And I say this all the time, you have to, a top tip I've got is, if you do struggle with that, if you do struggle with how to be consistent, then I would create one piece of content a week that is longer form, whether that's a podcast, a YouTube, an article, that for the rest of the week you can utilize, whether that's resharing it, whether it's cutting it into smaller bits. Essentially, as long as you are doing the two things I mentioned, which is adding value, which you're not going to do if all you do is just chuck it all at the wall every day. So if you're adding value and you're remaining consistent, that's what that could look like, once or twice a week. And then the other days you just reshare it, repurpose it. That's a really great opportunity. And also this is from teaching. Repetition is key. Repetition is key. So if you feel like your audience is going to get bored, they're not. If you really want people to remember what you are saying and remember your content and feel like you are helping them, you have to repeat yourself, because people do not remember things once. So it's not in our brain mechanism to be able to do that on the whole. So if you want to repurpose, reshare, and repeat, that's not boring. That's essential for your audience to remember the information that you're giving them.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about repurposing and taking maybe one piece of content, repurposing it. But the thing that's often missed in that, and you hit the nail on the head, the content in the first place has to add value. And by repurposing content that adds value, you add actually more value in different formats,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to resharing for the sake of sharing something, for the sake of getting something out there.
And a
Uh,
top tip on that,
mhm.
Simon, if I can, if you're thinking, okay, how do I know if I'm adding value? Here's a top tip. Ask yourself, like now, right? So get a pen and paper and think, okay, what is one question? This template you can use over and over. So what is one question I can answer now in 10 minutes? Write that question down. Then think, what are 3 bullet points that I'm going to share to answer that question? Then you share the 3 bullet points. And what do you want them to do at the end? So then you'd be able to do this. Hello, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. I'm going to answer this question for you in 10 minutes. I'm going to do it in 3 points. Point 1, blah, blah, blah. Point 2, blah, blah, blah. Point 3, blah, blah, blah. If you want to learn more, please go here. Just follow that method. And then you've added value, because you've answered a question they have, you've given it a structure, and you've told them where they can go next. That's it. That's all you need to do.
Love it. Great tip. Thank you, Sam. Some gold gems here for people watching or listening to this episode. Now, we're here on the Global Discussion, but I want to talk about another fabulous podcast that I do hear great things about. Tell us all about Being Bold in Business.
Oh, do you know what? I think very similar to this. I just wanted a place where we could have honest conversations, and a bit like this. It's nothing but honesty and just a good-hearted people connecting. So, Be Bold in Business is either mini masterclasses from me, essentially, a bit like if it was a solo episode, a bit like what I've been doing here with like mini top tips, that, or interviews with other people about their business, what they do, their insights, and just the truth. How have you found this? What did you navigate around this challenge? How have you felt earning more money? Whatever it might be. So it is essentially that. How can you become more bold in your business, but also in a really no pressure way? Like being bold or being brave in your business doesn't mean you have to be anything but yourself. So yeah, that's what we try and do.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I know you've spoken at lots of events. I know that you regularly featured in lots of mainstream publications, well-known publications, but you also do something that maybe isn't talked about enough, which is you have this Feed a Child for a Year as
Mm.
well. Can you tell us a bit about that and why that's important to you?
Yeah, so when I was teaching, I worked in a Catholic school. I've only ever worked in Catholic schools actually, and I went to a Catholic university. And it's in Catholic state schools, you part of the diocese and part of your requirement is to have charity partners. So during Lent, so the month, the 40 days, most Catholic schools will do some sort of fundraising during that period of Lent. And in the Catholic school I was in, each year group was responsible for raising money, and the head of year, which I was one, you had to come up with that initiative. And one of our big charity partners was Mary's Meals. And Mary's Meals is in Scotland. And I've got a twin brother, and my brother and his children, my nieces and nephews, and his wife, they live in Scotland. So as soon as I heard about Magnus and everything they were doing in Mary's Meals, of course, you know, the fact I have Scottish family was another really important thing for me. But at my school, we would raise money for Mary's Meals. And then when I started my business and I got to a point where I had profit, and I had, you know, enough that I wanted to give back, Mary's Meals really was the only option. So essentially, and of course I come from teaching and education, and I think that however we choose to educate, whether it's home educating, state, private boarding, however we do, education is so important. It gets me, it's so important. And I think it's really sad if a child doesn't have the chance to learn. So their little faces deserve to be lit up by learning new things. And,
It's incredible, Sam. Yeah.
yeah, and in some countries, of course, they don't have what we have in free education. So I decided that I wanted to, rather than just sponsor one child, I wanted my company to sponsor a school. So I spoke to Magnus, I spoke to the team, and I said, my company, I personally want to be able to sponsor a school every year. So I pay an annual amount every year for 180 children to have a hot meal every day they're at school, and the staff. And then I also give my community the chance to do that. And I've been doing that maybe for 5 years. And something I'm doing with my clothing line in January is separate to this charity. I'm going to be launching a line for, and all of the money is going to go to women that have that is going to support women that have experienced domestic abuse. So yeah, the education and children and making sure that they have access to that is so important to me, as you can tell. So yeah, Mary's Meals was the charity that I chose purely because I was exposed to it in teaching, and I just loved what it stood for. And I love that it started in his garage, and this is the other thing, he's the epitome of what I want people to have. He's so successful, but he's so laid back. He's just this normal guy wearing jeans and a top. Like, you would never know. I love the unassuming nature of Mary's Meals. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing. That's what I do. You caught me off guard there.
Well, that's wonderful, and it's obvious to people watching or listening to us how passionate you are about this, how much it means to you, and the fact that you've been doing it now for over 5 years and continue to support that. It's a great thing to be involved in. So thank you for doing that, and wonderful to hear that approach will be applied to your clothing business too, because we don't have to do any of this stuff, but it is wonderful to hear that. So thank you so much indeed. And I hope you don't mind me raising that. I think it's such an
No,
important
not at
topic.
all. And I think as well, just to say, the principle of money, something that I believe is the more you have, the more you can give. So if you do want to start changing your mindset and you want to become wealthier, you want to be more abundant, for me, that's important. Like, it's not for me to just keep it all. The more I have, the more I can give. So when I get more, I don't want to just keep it in a bucket. It is that ripple effect. And if you think about that in terms of your energy and your impact, and like now when you hear me talking about it, even though that emotion, it gets your heart, you know, and I'm like, oh, that's why I'm doing this. So it's never just about the number and like, oh, I need to make 10K this month and I need to get 100K, I need to have 6 figures. It's not for the marketing, it's none of that. It's for you to be able to, when you have more, to give more. And when you start to live by that principle, even little things like I sell clothes on Vinted that my daughter has had for less than I bought them, because I know other people can still benefit. So by me having more, I can obviously give my daughter, great clothes, but when she can't wear them anymore, what do I do with them? I'm just going to keep them. I'm going to give them to someone else that could benefit, and they can pay less for them. Even that, it's giving. So I have more, I can give more. So try and bring that, even if it's not donating to that level of a charity, it could even be that you want to set up a fund for your own child, and you're like, I'm just going to put £20 a month into an account for my own child, and start your own thing. I want to give more. It could be that you want to pay more into your pension, so charity isn't the only answer, but it's another way of energetically understanding what money is all about. It's not just for us to keep it all for ourselves. It is about that. It's about creating a bigger impact, I believe.
No, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think obviously in order to give more, you have to be able to create more in the first place. And
Yeah.
it's back to that word abundance that we talked about earlier. It is wonderful that you're involved in those endeavors. And I know just in your world, you also bring people together, don't you?
Yeah.
From a business perspective. And I think the magic numbers are around 65 people for one type of event. And then you have a smaller, sort of more private, intimate event for maybe 16 people. Could you tell us the difference in those and how they work? Because I think that's a really lovely way as well of bringing people together to share this type of information. It's different to being on the stage at somebody else's event where you're kind of almost creating these opportunities for these people to come together, right?
For sure. So this is another top tip. If you want to be seen as the leader that you are, if you want to be that trailblazer, that thought leader, create that for yourself. So very early on, so I think my first 70-person event was in 2018, maybe 2018. And I knew very quickly that as well as doing collaborations and multi-speaker events and doing that, I wanted to be known for my own thing. So if you do and you want to be seen as this leader, you want to build your authority, you want to create this real gumption around what you're doing, make sure you're creating something for yourself and your own creative outlet. So even if it is an event for 3 people and it's over brunch, if it's 20 people, whatever, the number is not really the importance, it's the principle of you. So I wanted to create an opportunity. People compliment me all the time on bringing good people together. And of course, that is not just down to them. It's also because, a bit like us, when you are a genuine person, you connect genuine people and you attract genuine people. So whenever someone new comes into that, they always say to me, Sam, you bring the nicest people together. And I'm not surprised, because that's one of my values. I think that's really important. So I have 2 times in a year where the public can come to an event, the summer and Christmas. And then I do quarterly mastermind days with my clients. So we meet in real life and they connect. So the difference between the two is, if you're in my quarterly strategy days, I really want the people that are in my world working with me to build friendships. That's so important. And I've had clients that have gone on to start businesses together, that have done collaborations together, that become best friends. So that's what those are for. The bigger events are to give you and your mind an awakening that you are not on your own. And that you're like, oh my gosh, there's more people like me that exist. Wow. Oh my God, like, this is great. I don't feel so alone. And I don't feel like my ideas are so wild and outrageous. So the intimate events are to give you a chance to really build relationships. And the bigger events are for you to realize that you aren't on your own. You 100% are in the right place. And there are so many other people like you. That's kind of the difference between the two. But the bigger reason, which is something I want you to think about, is I want to be known for the person that's creating that. I want to be known for that. That is one of my superpowers. So I've created it myself. And it started, my first ever event was called Brunch in Business, or Business Brunch. And it was £20 a ticket in Borough Market, in the top of a cafe. and I had maybe 30 people. And then now my events are £300. So, you know, you start wherever you're at. It's not about the money. It's not about the number of people. It's about the intention that you are setting and bringing people together with your name at the front of it and with your intention and heart, bringing them together. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it has that knock on to your own brand, back to what we were talking about, doesn't it? You become known for
100%.
something. And I know whether it's the sort of more intimate, smaller numbers or the much bigger groups, very, I think, more salubrious surroundings now than the calf at the market. If I'm
Yeah.
honest, they look pretty nice to me in terms of where you're hosting these things. Um, but you know, a great opportunity for people to come together. So thank you for sharing a little bit of insight into that. So there's so much in your world. You know, we've talked about clothing line, we've talked about helping women in business, we've talked about feeding children, we've talked about your networking events. You know, there's the books, the podcasts, and you're offering all these resources. And the question I'm coming to is something I like to ask all the guests on the show, which is about how planning works in their world. Because to anybody watching or listening to our discussion, they must be sitting there thinking, how does Sam do all this? You know, so are you a meticulous planner? Do you take each day as it comes? What do the next 6 to 12 months look like in your head? How do you work all this stuff out? How does the horizon and the roadmaps work in your life, Sam? Could you share a little bit about you and how you go about that?
Yeah, great question. And you're right, I do get asked that a lot. You know, how do you do it all? You know, I have a nearly 2-year-old, so and she's with me half the week. So she only has childcare Monday, Tuesdays. So I still am very heavily involved in parenting and, you know, all of that. So yeah, I do get this question a lot. So there's a couple of things I want to share. One, I'm a manifesting generator for anyone that knows anything about human design. So as an individual, I'm naturally quite creative, but also love the follow through in my nature. So I'm very good at the idea, but I also love to see it through. As an individual, that's kind of in my makeup. But for me, this is how I describe this to anyone. And this also comes from teaching. So we thrive with structure. Humans, right? We thrive in safety. We thrive in knowing what we can and we can't do, right? So that's we flourish when we know what is going on. When there's too much ambiguity, for the majority of people, that can sometimes actually create a bit of paralysis. Like, I don't actually know what the line is, so where am I going towards? I don't actually know what I could be doing, so I won't do anything. So for me, creating routine and structure allows me to thrive. So there are a few things that are really important for me. And if anyone does anything in terms of like masculine and feminine energy, I'm very in my masculine. I like to do, I like to have a plan, I like to have an action, and I get shit done. But the feminine is all about the creative and, like, you know, the thinker and the flow of things. I'm not as good in the flow. I like the plan. But the plan allows you to have creative freedom. So if you are someone that has lots of creative ideas and doesn't follow through, maybe you have ADHD, and maybe you have other learning needs like dyslexia, dyspraxia, you have other elements that make it harder for you to just focus on one thing all the time, or you get hyper focused and, you know, it's too much pressure. If you are someone that likes to have lots of freedom, you're very spontaneous, spunky, like fly off the cuff, very, very last minute, structure is actually going to allow the best parts of yourself to flourish. So for me, I have a plan in terms of, I have a 12-month plan. So I know my plan for 2025. All my calls are scheduled for the whole of 2025 in all of my programs, mastermind, membership, one-to-one, everything's scheduled. I then know already when I can take all my holidays, when I'm not working, when I have free time, the days that I'm off. I know how much space I've got to sell, who I'm selling to, and why I'm selling to them. So for me, even that feels lighter. I know exactly what's happening in my calendar. So if someone says, can you go away? Yeah, I can actually, because I don't have any calls. Everything for me is about, I want to create, pardon me, ease and flow, but that ease and flow and freedom can only come when I know what I'm doing. But the other thing that's really important is I do allow space for other things. So for example, like I've got all my schedules set out. The clothing line was new this year. That wasn't something that I planned last year, but it was a creative opportunity that came to me and I said yes to it. This podcast wasn't planned in 2030, 2023, and I had it scheduled. So this level of creativity comes. So when an opportunity comes in, I say yes if it feels right. And I know when I can do it because I know my schedule. So I know that's a long-winded way, but I just really hope it helps people that potentially struggle with planning or plan almost too much, they do nothing. There's a balance with both. Look at what your week looks like. Is it what you want it to look like? And if you know you want more space, start to plan your week so that you have that space. You don't work Fridays, you don't start before 10. And once you have that structure, as hard as it might feel to begin with, and it might feel restrictive, it will actually become really expansive because you will know what you're doing and when you're doing it, and when you have the autonomy to do anything else.
It's such an important point. Thanks for sharing that. It's great as well because I love hearing how people approach their own setup, if you like. And it's obvious that you have things scheduled out, but I love also building in the time for those sort of serendipitous moments, that kind of opportunity that just happens to come your way. And if you don't have time in your calendar, in your setup, you can often miss some of those great opportunities that come your way. And ultimately, I think what you're talking about is, which we often forget, that we design our own lives to some degree. You know, if we're fortunate enough, we can actually take some control over that. What does that week, month, year look like? I'm a little bit jealous that you've got the whole of next year planned out, though, I got to be honest. But Sam, before we wrap up, two things from me. Number one is, I'd like to give you the opportunity maybe to share something that's important to you, or some sort of parting thought for our worldwide audience here today. And secondly, and really importantly, if people want to get some more top tips from you, get some more valuable information, find out more about what you do, or even get involved, where is the best place to point people to at this stage?
Okay, so my parting piece of wisdom. I firmly believe this. So a lot of people say, why do some people make it and some people don't? Why do some people get there quickly and some people it takes longer? I live by this belief, and I have since I was about 18. My success is inevitable. That's it. I'm not here for timelines. I'm not here to compete and compare with anyone else. I know that my success is inevitable when I do the work. And I firmly believe that. So if you have, or right now you're in a space, and as a leader and as a change maker and as a person of influence, it can sometimes be engulfing. Just take a minute to think about, what is your everyday narrative? What is your everyday belief? And when you have that unwavering belief in yourself and what you can achieve, it doesn't matter how many times you post online. It doesn't matter what so-and-so on the internet is doing. It doesn't matter when your last holiday was. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you believe in that, you know? So that's my parting wisdom is, please sit with yourself and think, what do I want my daily belief to be saying to me? What do I want my mind, my subconscious mind, to be reminding me of every day? And if you're sitting here thinking, that's just not going to be me, I don't think I'm ready, I'm not confident enough, I'm not bubbly enough, and all of those things, take a minute and say, that is not ever going to get you to what you know you deserve. How can we rewrite that narrative? And if you wanted to find me, just come and find me on Instagram. I would say Samantha Hearne on Instagram is I mostly hang out on Instagram. I am trying to get better on LinkedIn, Simon, but you know, that is a work in progress. But I would just say come and hang out on Instagram and you'll find everything from there.
Very good. Well, thank you so much indeed. That brings us nicely to the end of the global discussion today. I want to thank Samantha Hearne and everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. Make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, do all the usual things I need you to do to help support this show. And do go out and check out everything that Sam's doing. There's a wealth of information there. Check out her website, catch up with her on Instagram. And there's so much good information there. I can't recommend that enough. And I hope that you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers, just like Sam. But Sam, what a pleasure to have you on the show again today. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just took some cheeky pictures of you.
That's okay. All righty. Thanks, Sam. It's been a pleasure. I'll talk to you real soon.
Bye.
Bye now.